Hey there, welcome to my studio. Today we are going to be making some faceted mugs, or just one. So we're starting off with 1.5 pounds of clay, and I'll take you through the making and the faceting, and then we're going to pull a handle on it. So let's get started. We're going to start out by centering the clay. So get the clay wet, and we're going to be coning up and down. So we're moving the clay. It's not a static thing where we're just holding and forcing the clay, trying to get it centered. We need to be able to move the clay up and down to get it nicely centered from the inside all the way out. And then once we get there, we're going to open it up and push down. This is not going to get a trimmed foot or anything. So in between 1/8 and 1/4 inch thickness on the bottom is about right. We'll come in and compress. You can do this with your fingers or your thumb, or I like to use this flexible rib that I can push down in a pretty wide surface area across the whole thing. And then we're going to start by pulling up the walls. Now this is a faceted piece, like I said, so we're going to be cutting away clay with a tool. So this clay needs to be relatively thick, which makes it a nice project for beginners that have a hard time throwing a larger piece or thinning out the clay. So when we're pulling these walls up, we're going to keep everything really, really thick. I would say almost up to 1/2 inch if you want. It's going to take a few tries to get the thickness right, but it's usually a little bit thicker than what you'd expect at first. So say about 3/8 of an inch, something like that. And make sure that the top doesn't get too thinned out either. Now we're going to start setting the rim up a little bit. We have a little bit of an angle there. Remove the water out of the bottom of the pot. And then we're going to take a straight edged rib. It could be really any tool. We're going to dry the outside surface off and get a nice straight area to work with. Now this top section that I just angled in, that's going to be unfaceted. So the bottom, where I'm going to do a little bit of an undercut, is where we'll start the facet. And then the top line is where the facet is going to end. So we'll get that all cleaned up. And then we'll stop the wheel and grab our faceting tool here. Now this is basically wire bar with a wire going across it. It's like a cheese cutter, and I oftentimes use a cheese cutter, but my cheese cutter just broke, so I went back to this tool. We're starting at the bottom and working our way, slicing up through the clay, and I kind of tilt it at the very end just to create that angle. Now when we make our facets, we want to do them smoothly. We don't want to hesitate. So you're going up nice and smooth, get to the top, and then pull it away. So with the cheese cutter, you'll push it all the way in and move that wire up to cut across a piece of clay. Now each facet you want to overlap. You don't want to leave any thrown surface onto there. We're trying to basically cut away all of the little thrown surfaces. And nothing is really planned out as far as how many are going to happen. We just kind of work with what we have as it's going. So keep working your way across the pot. Just be patient each time. I'll clean the wire off of the tool. And here's the last one. It's going to overlap on each side. Come up and get rid of that. Now we can't touch the outside of the pot anymore, but I want to put a slight belly in this piece. So just from the inside, I'm going to be pushing out, creating a slight belly in there. The wheel speed is pretty fast at this point. It helps me see the profile and see what's going on. Then we'll come in with our wooden knife and give an undercut. On the bottom, it kind of cleans that edge up and makes it uniform. Finish the top edge, and then I create a little line to frame where we stopped our facets. Now that's not necessary to do. It's just kind of a visual stopping point. We're creating beginnings and endings in this piece, and then we're going to finish off the lip where your mouth is going to touch. And that's why I like that part to be unfaceted. It's a nice, smooth, and comfortable spot for your mouth to rest. All right, so the pot has nice, clean, dry lines on there, and we're going to dry our hands off after cutting it off. So dry pot, dry hands. and we can lift the pot off the wheel. And we cut it off with a wiggle wire and kind of made a little pattern on there. Now for finishing the bottom, it's about halfway set up, so it's about leather hard now. It's sat for about a day, uncovered in the studio. And we come back, and I'll put a little cap on the bottom there so I can push down without denting the bottom. And it's just sitting on a foam bat, and I'll trim off a little bit of excess on the bottom and round that out. And yeah, it's a little bit wobbly, but we'll just kind of tap center it back in. And you can throw a chuck, or basically a little round cone for it to sit on. It might be a little bit more stable that way. Use a sponge to clean that up, and then I'll stick my fingernail down and create a little groove on the bottom to frame the wiggle wire pattern that we made on the bottom there. Kind of like the line that we used to frame the facets, we're going to do it on the underside, and we're going to frame the pattern that we made on the bottom. Here's a little look. And I'll use the palm of my hand to push down and make sure that that's domed up a little bit so it sits properly, and also so it can flex in the drying and firing process. We use our stamp to put our mark on there, a little CT for my initials, and you can use your thumb to kind of clean up any of those little rough lines. I don't want to smooth them out too much, but I want them just to be softened a little bit. Now it's time to pull a handle. So we just take a coil of clay that we rolled out. It's relatively thick. We'll say about an inch thick. We'll just kind of pat in the ends and splay out the top. So we're trying to make the connection point a little bit wider than the rest of the handle. It kind of gives it a strong shoulder visually and physically for it to attach to. And so we're not going to slip and score. Oftentimes we'll do slipping and scoring on the piece. But with this clay and at its state, I'm just going to add a little bit of clean water to it. And I'll rub it in at the attachment points. And I'm going to let the water soak into the pot. And once that sheen starts to disappear from the really wetness, the handle is going to be ready to attach. And I'll add just a little bit of water on that handle to kind of get that dampened and ready to go. And sometimes you got to come back and re-wet it if you kind of missed your window of opportunity. Basically, we're trying to create an area on the pot that is receptive and open to accept the handle so they can attach and become one. Now we'll offer the handle up to it. We'll start pushing around it as our connection point there. And I don't usually blend in my handles. You can blend in your handles all as much as you want, but I'll set it up to it and kind of wiggle it back and forth, and you'll feel it start to catch. And then that's when it's really connected well. And I'll take a little bit of time to make sure that it's connected and all the areas around it. And now it's time to start pulling the handle. I will dip the handle in the water and not dip my hand in the water to pull the handle. It keeps it a little bit cleaner and less water from going around everywhere. And so we're basically moving our hand across the clay, pulling it down, and tapering the edges a little bit. And once we get to the right length, we'll bend it over, make sure it's centered. We don't want a crooked handle. And I'll start pushing in on the bottom and welding the bottom to the clay here. We'll take a look, and I'll splay it out too, so the bottom connection point is a little bit wider than the handle itself. And then for that very, very bottom piece that overhangs, I'll dry my thumb off and swing it across, and it kind of rips it off. It doesn't work with a wet finger. It has to be dry. And then that's how we get that nice clean edge on the bottom. And then there's our handled and faceted mug. And like I said, there's more. We are going to add just one more thing. These faceted mugs can get a little bit heavy. So one thing that I think that's nice is a little bit of a thumb rest. We'll just take a little ball of clay, get it slightly damp, and kind of twist and turn it onto there until it gets nice and stuck onto it. We'll take a wooden dowel and rock it back and forth. And this is going to be a little thumb rest. Sometimes on heavier pots, I'll put a little piece there for your thumb to kind of hold on to, which I think is nice. And there, now we have the faceted handled mug. And like I said, these faceted pieces are nice for earlier beginner projects because they can be a little bit thicker, and then we can cut away that thickness for aesthetic purposes. So I hope you enjoyed, and go make yourself a faceted pot.